Marhaba. Right now we're going to talk about a structure called ism al-fa'il. Or what we sometimes call in English the active participle, right? The doer of an action. If you've studied al-jumla al-fa'liya, you can remember that when we diagram a verbal sentence in Arabic, fa'il is the subject of a sentence, right? The doer of the verbal action in the sentence. And in colloquial Arabic, and sometimes in formal Arabic too, we can actually use that wazn, right? That pattern of vowels and consonants, fa'il, with other verbs. We can use it in the place of a conjugated verb, right? We can take our root and substitute it in for fa, ayn, lam to come up with a meaningful active participle. So let's take an example. For example, in formal Arabic, we might use the verb to live, the conjugated verb huwa. Let's say he lives. Huwa yaskun. So if we wanted to make a whole sentence, let's say he lives in Egypt, right? Yaskun fi Masr. Now we could probably say that in Egyptian or Levantine dialect as well, but we might also hear this verb substituted out for an ism fa'il version of the same thing. Instead of saying huwa yaskun fi Masr with that conjugated verb, we would figure out what the root is, right? The jadr, that tri-consonantal root, and in this case it's sin, kaf, nun, and then we would substitute those letters in for each of those placeholder letters, right? Fa, ayn, lam. So instead of saying huwa yaskun fi Masr, we could also say huwa sakin fi Masr. Literally what we're saying is he is a liver in Egypt, right? He is doing living in Egypt. Now since this is ism fa'il, right? It's an ism, it's a noun, right? We have a noun describing this verbal action, or what we think of as a verbal action taking place. And since it's a noun, if we want to refer to someone else, say a woman, instead of huwa, we might want to talk about a hiya. And in that case, we would need to make this ism fa'il agree in terms of gender, right? So if we were talking about a female or a woman, we would put that feminine marker, ta marbuta, on the end. So huwa sakin fi Masr, hiya sakina fi Masr, right? She is a liver in Egypt. She's doing living in Egypt. And if we wanted to talk about a group of people, we would add that sound regular plural ending that we have in dialect. Hum sakinin fi Masr, right? So let's take another example. Suppose that someone is sharing information with you that you happen already to be aware of, and this is tiresome to you, and you want to say, okay already, I know, right? We could use a conjugated verb. We could just say, arif. I know. Or, in Levantine or Masri dialect, we might choose to say, I would suppose I, as a man, I would say, all right, I am a knower, right? I know. And to do that again, we would isolate this root. We know that alif is part of the conjugated verb. So we would take our ayn, ra, fa, and pop them into the places of fa, ayn, lam here, right? And we would retain that vowel structure, that skeleton that we have. And I could just say, ana arif. I know, I am a knower of what you are telling me, so please do not waste my time, right? Or if you were a woman and you wanted to say that, ana arifa. Or maybe as a class, your instructor is telling you something that you already reviewed last week and you feel you have a grip on it, so you could all say, Nihna arifin. Right? They're pretty equivalent in meaning. Sometimes ism fa'il used this way in colloquial is a little bit closer to the kind of present continuous that we can use in English, right? I am going, I am seeing, I am living, as opposed to the simple present, I go, I see, I live. These are very much shades of gray, right? In Arabic, we're not concerned with those exact equivalencies so much, and they don't really, those precise shades of tense are not really something we can express as easily in formal Arabic, and we don't really need to. But sometimes ism fa'il used this way in the place of a verb conveys more of that present continuous ing gerund form, right? A couple of points before we finish up. First of all, ism fa'il is definitely not uniquely a colloquial structure. In fact, a lot of words that are used all the time in Fusha, formal Arabic, and dialects come from, are this form, are ism fa'il. For example, one that you might already know is talib, right? And again, we need to listen for that rhythmic stress, the music of the word talib, which comes from the root ta, lam, ba, which has to do with talib, right, means student, and ta, lam, ba, that root has to do with requesting or demanding, right? You're seeking information from someone. Or you might know the verb yaktub, to write, he writes, yaktub, and from the same root, kaf, ta, ba, we get the ism fa'il katib, which is the word that we see most often for a writer, right? Someone who writes novels or magazine articles, katib. Another point is that in all these examples we have used form 1 verbs, right? The simplest form. There are derived forms as well. If you go look at the videos on masdar, you'll see some of those forms written out in charts, and each of those derived forms has its own slightly different but fairly intuitive form of ism fa'il. That's not something you need to worry about controlling so much right now, but be aware as you learn more verbs and gain more control over them that any verb really can be put into this structure depending on the context and depending on the sentence. It is a possibility.